"You're still the best thing that ever happened to this town, Nora Calloway," Caleb said. He was handing her a paint sample card. It was yellow. She looked at the yellow card. She looked at him, and she thought, "I have made a terrible mistake leaving this place. I have made this mistake for 10 years. The yellow card was called Harvest Gold. Hello, and welcome to The Lingering Heart. This story has been living in my head for weeks, the particular feeling of going back to a place you thought you'd outgrown and discovering it's been keeping something for you all along. Today's story is set in a small Tennessee town in October, and it is cozy and warm and full of the very best kind of second chances. Nora Calloway left Harvest Creek, Tennessee at 22 and didn't look back. Not really. Now she's 32. The farmhouse her grandmother left her needs to be sold, and the estate agent has sent her to Marsh Hardware for paint samples. Caleb Marsh is behind the counter. He looks exactly the same. He looks completely different, and the farmhouse, it turns out, needs a great deal of work. Before we begin, if you're new to The Lingering Heart, welcome. I share romance stories here every week, stories that stay with you, that remind you why love matters. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, please subscribe so you never miss a tale. And if you're already part of our community, thank you so much for being here. Now, let's begin. The farmhouse looked smaller than she remembered, which was impossible because it was the same farmhouse. Nora sat in the rental car in the gravel driveway for a full 5 minutes before she made herself get out. The maple tree her grandmother had planted the year Nora was born was enormous now, a full blaze of orange and red, dropping leaves onto the porch roof like it was putting on a show just for her. She had a return flight to Nashville in 6 days. She was going to sell this house, deal with the estate paperwork, and be back in her apartment before she had time to feel anything complicated. The estate agent's name was Linda. She was enthusiastic about the property's rustic charm, and she had a list of local contractors. Most of them weren't returning calls this time of year. Linda suggested the hardware store for basic supplies and paint samples. Caleb Marsh runs it. You probably remember him from school. Lovely man. Nora said she didn't really remember. Linda gave her the look of someone who absolutely did not believe her. Nora drove to Marsh Hardware. He was behind the counter when she walked in, talking to an older man about PVC pipe fittings, gesturing in the way he always gestured when he was explaining something practical, like the thing itself was obviously interesting, and anyone who didn't see that wasn't paying attention. He was wearing a faded green flannel and had paint on his forearm, and his hair was shorter than it used to be. He looked up when the bell over the door rang. There was a half second where the world rearranged itself. Then, Nora Calloway. Not a question, just her name, said like it meant something. They did the thing people do when they haven't seen each other in 10 years, and the last time involved a tearful argument in a parking lot at midnight. They were extremely normal and pleasant about everything. She explained the farmhouse situation. He pointed her toward the paint samples. He mentioned that the clapboard siding on the north side would need replacing before winter. She said she'd hire someone. He said most people were booked out until spring. She said she'd figure it out. He said okay. They were both lying about how fine they were. She went back to the farmhouse and spent the afternoon taking photographs she told herself were for the listing agent and were actually just for her. The kitchen window light at 4 o'clock, the way the creek looked through the back porch screen, her grandmother's handwriting on the recipe cards still tacked to the corkboard. She hadn't been a working photographer for 6 years. She'd pivoted to the commercial side, brand campaigns and product shoots, very well paid, technically excellent, and about as creatively nourishing as arranging socks. But the light in this kitchen was doing something extraordinary, and her hands knew what to do with it before her brain caught up. Caleb showed up the next morning at 7:45 with a ladder and a box of clapboard nails. He knocked on the door, and when she opened it, still in her pajamas, holding a coffee cup, he looked at the coffee and said, Is there more of that? She stared at him. He said, "The siding." "I had a free morning," she said. "I told you I'd figure it out," he said. "You said that, yes." He was already setting up the ladder. She got him a coffee. He was good at working in easy silence, which she had forgotten. He didn't fill every moment with talking the way some people did. He just worked, steadily and well, and occasionally said something when there was something worth saying. She found herself working inside near the windows where she could hear the sound of the hammer and the creak of the ladder, and she felt something she hadn't felt in her Nashville apartment in longer than she could remember, like the day had a texture to it, like she was somewhere real. At noon he came inside, and she made sandwiches and they sat on the back porch, and she asked how his parents were, and he asked about her work, and they talked around the edge of the thing they weren't talking about for about 20 minutes before she said, quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't write. After I left." He looked at the creek. "I know you are," he said, not bitterly, just as a fact. "I know." She had expected it to feel better saying it. It felt like the beginning of something rather than the end. He came back the next day, and the day after that. There was, it turned out, more wrong with the farmhouse than either of them had initially assessed, and Caleb seemed to find this genuinely interesting in the way he found most practical problems genuinely interesting. He brought different tools. He brought his dog, a large and extremely opinionated golden retriever named Fred, who immediately decided the farmhouse was his and Nora was his person. Nora, who had not been anyone's person in some time, found she did not object. On the fourth day, she drove out past the edge of town and photographed the creek meadow in the early morning fog. Really photographed it, the way she used to, lying on the cold ground to get the angle right, not thinking about deliverables or client briefs or brand guidelines. When she got back, Caleb was sitting on the porch steps with Fred and 2 coffees, and he said, "You look like yourself again." She sat down beside him. "What does that mean?" He looked at her sideways, the way he always had when she was being deliberately obtuse. "You know what it means, Nora." She did know. She had known since the maple tree and the kitchen light and the way the hammer sounded through the windows. She had known since the first morning with the clapboard nails and the borrowed coffee. She had come here to close something down, and instead she had walked back into the one place where she had ever felt entirely, unself-consciously herself. The problem was the life in Nashville, the lease, the studio she'd signed for 2 more years, the career that looked like success. "I don't know how to come back," she said quietly. "I don't know how to do that." "You don't have to know yet," Caleb said. His voice was easy, certain in the particular way he was certain about things, not because he'd figured everything out, but because he was comfortable not having to. "You've been here 4 days, Nora. The house isn't even fixed yet." She looked at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said slowly, like he was figuring it out as he went, "that you could stay long enough to find out what you're saying before you decide anything." Fred put his head in her lap. She put her hand on Fred's head. "The flight is day after tomorrow," she said. "I know when your flight is," Caleb said. He turned to look at her then, fully, the way he hadn't quite let himself do since she'd walked into the hardware store. "I looked it up." She laughed, a surprised, honest laugh. "You looked it up. Small town," he said. "Linda talks." He was looking at her steadily. "I'm not asking you to stay forever. I'm asking you to stay long enough to have a conversation we've been not having since you walked into my store." "Okay," she said, "okay." She called the airline. The woman on the phone was very helpful. The rebooking fee was not ruinous. She texted her assistant in Nashville and said she had some personal things to deal with and would be working remotely for the next 2 weeks. Then she sat back down on the porch steps next to Caleb and Fred, and Caleb handed her the second coffee that had gone cold, and she drank it anyway. "So," she said, "that conversation." "Yeah," he said. He was smiling, slightly, in the way that meant he was trying not to smile more. That conversation, they talked until the sun went down. They talked through things that were easy and things that weren't, things she'd spent 10 years not letting herself think about, and things he'd apparently been quite calmly holding in place, waiting. He was not angry. She had expected anger and found instead something more useful: honesty, patience, and the very particular kind of love that stays quietly in place even when it has no particular reason to. By the time the porch light came on and Fred had fallen asleep between them, Nora Calloway understood something she should have understood a long time ago. She had never actually left Harvest Creek. She had just been somewhere else. She did not sell the farmhouse that fall. She had it properly repaired instead, most of it by a man in a faded green flannel who refused to accept anything for his labor except coffee and the occasional dinner. She gave notice on her Nashville lease in November. She started shooting again, really shooting, the kind of work that made her feel like her hands belonged to her. The following spring, a photography series called Creek and Meadow, Harvest County in 4 Seasons, was published in a small regional journal with a dedication that read simply, "For the town that kept something for me while I was gone." And for the record, the farmhouse is not for sale. It never really was. Every love story deserves to linger. If Nora and Caleb's story felt a little like coming home to you, I'd love it if you'd hit that like button. It tells me which stories touch you most. And if you'd like more tales like this, subscribe to The Lingering Heart. New stories arrive every week. Have you ever gone back to a place that held an old heartbreak and found something completely unexpected waiting for you? Tell us in the comments. Until next time, may your heart linger in love.